Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by the North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and the North Coast Journal's arts and features editor, Jenifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both, and Happy New Year.
Hey, Tanya, how you doing?
So we're going to jump right into it this week. We've got some really deep dive story to bring to the cover, and Thad is going to fill us in on what's coming to this week's cover story.
Yeah, Tanya, this week we have a story I've been working on for longer than I care to admit. It is a long, complicated story, diving into essentially a dispute over policing authority on the Bear River Rancheria. This came to the tip that led to the story came to us quite a while ago, and essentially, we'd heard that the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office had unsuccessfully tried to prosecute a tribal police officer for conduct on duty, and the allegation was not that he had used excessive force or done anything overtly out of bounds, but that the job he was doing for Bear River and what he'd been instructed to do exceeded the sheriff's office felt exceeded the authority of what a tribal police officer could do. So was kind of inherently very interesting to us, and we've spent months and months kind of diving in with records requests and trying to consult experts in criminal law on tribal lands and trying to figure out kind of exactly what happened and why.
Well, and where do we want to start?
Well, I think I'll start just with a very basic primer on the law. I think most folks don't understand kind of the jurisdictional morass that native lands currently are in the state of California. So in 1953, Congress passed Public Law 280, which essentially took jurisdiction over tribal lands in 6 states, including California, out of federal hands and relegated them to the state. And so this created kind of an unfunded mandate for state law enforcement to police tribal lands, and it also created kind of an instant conflict between state governments that had traditionally been really hostile to tribal members and Native people policing these lands. And so, fast forward to current days, Native communities very much feel like Public Law 280 is partially to blame for the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis, and that both the lack of trust between Native people and the state law enforcement they're dependent on, and the just kind of again jurisdictional issues kind of contribute to those cases not being investigated promptly and not being investigated thoroughly. So really what Public Law 280 does is says that it's up to state law enforcement agencies like the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office to enforce state law on tribal land. Now, tribes can start their own police departments to enforce tribal ordinances and tribal law, and they can reach cross-deputization agreements with state agencies like the Sheriff's Office to then enforce state law, or with the federal government through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to enforce federal law. There's a bunch of complexities in all these different designations, but the basic fallback of the law is that, Tribal police do not have authority off of tribal lands, and they have a fairly limited authority on tribal lands without kind of the blessing of an outside agency like the sheriff's office. Now, where the disputes about Bear River really kind of come to a head is this question of whether tribal police had the authority to police non-tribal members, so non-native people, on the reservation, and really just to the extent of if they suspected them of a state crime, like having an active state warrant out for their arrest, or having, committed a crime that put tribal members in jeopardy, or something like that, whether they could detain non-native people and wait for another law enforcement agency like the sheriff's office to come take custody of these folks and book them into jail. And so all that's kind of context to late 2019, Bear River starts up its own police department. It is on the process of kind of getting this federal certification to enforce federal law, but hadn't gotten it yet. And in January of 2020, a Bear River police officer, Josh Bate, was on patrol, had just kind of a really off a reservation would be a really routine law enforcement interaction. He noticed a vehicle code infraction, pulled the car over, found out that the passenger had an active warrant for his arrest. But because he couldn't personally arrest this person, he called the sheriff's. He says he called the sheriff's office to say kind of, hey, we got this warrant suspect, is an active warrant? If so, do you want us to detain this person until you can take them in custody? He says he was informed by the sheriff's office, like, yes, we want this person. Please take them to the police station and a deputy will come pick them up. That happened. The deputy came, transported this guy to jail. Josh says, he kind of just didn't think anything of it and went back to his shift. And then there was another incident a few days later in which he contacted somebody acting suspiciously at the gas station. This incident kind of came to a head in that he said he was giving the guy a lawful order just to stay and answer questions, basically detaining him, telling him he was not free to leave. The gentleman refused that and tried to leave. Josh tried to physically detain him, keep him from leaving, and a violent struggle ensued where the guy allegedly stabbed Josh several times with a screwdriver while trying to kind of beat him away so he could drive away. Josh ended up detaining him, and so those are the two kind of incidents that the case surrounds, or the story surrounds. But really what we learned in reporting and through these records requests is that there was this mounting frustration within the sheriff's office and this mounting question of like whether these Bear River officers were acting outside of their authority, whether by contacting non-native people on the reservation, by stopping them, by detaining them, checking them for warrants and things like that, they were kind of exceeding what they were allowed to do. And there was certainly a contingent in the sheriff's office that was very vocal about feeling that they were exceeding their authority, that they were not real police officers. I think they're referred to in some of the emails as so-called police officers or quote police officers. And ultimately, the decision is made to refer Josh Bate for prosecution from the DA's office for a variety of very serious crimes, from impersonating a peace officer to kidnapping to false imprisonment. The DA ultimately rejects these charges in the interest of justice. And what's really curious to me is that nowhere throughout this process is Josh informed that that he's either under criminal investigation, that he's been referred for criminal charges in the DA's office, or that the DA's office has declined to charge him. And so it's not until several years later when he's applying, or 2 years later when he's applying for a job at the University Police Department at Cal Poly, when he's going through a background check and they flag that he has, according to the Department of Justice database, he has been under criminal investigation for felonies, which means he failed his background check and was essentially unhirable in law enforcement. So this dispute kind of effectively ended his career.
And the nuance here is that tribal officers they go through the same procedure as state officers. And
yeah, I think that's a really important distinction, Tanya. And so not all tribal officers do. Tribes are free to kind of set their own standards for what their officers are going to be. But Bear River was, from all accounts, intent on having a professional police force. And so the chief that they hired had been through POST, the California the Commission on Peace Officer Standard and Training, and he made a point that he was only going to, hire officers who'd done the same. So yeah, Josh was a member of the 2017 graduating class from the CR Police Academy. He was post-certified, and Dana Norton, the man who was chief there at the time, said, that was really important to him. That he wanted a police department run the way that Post would want a police department run. So he made a comment to me and just talking about his frustration with the situation is that, he says, I went to the same academy that the sheriff went to, just a few years after he went to it. All of our officers have the same credentials. I don't understand kind of why the sheriff's office was taking such a hard stance on this.
And so when reaching out and covering this story, what does seem to be the cause of this stance?
Well, first of all, I'll say that, I was unable to speak to anybody from tribal government, which was a real frustration to me in reporting the story. Made a bunch of inquiries and nobody was willing to speak to me. So I don't really know what the Bear River Entry the Tribal Council's outlook on the situation was, but I did get the chance to speak to then Chief Dana Norton and Sheriff William Hansel at some length about their views of the law and kind of how this escalated to the point that it did. And, as they say in the story, what became really clear to me is that there was an existing animosity between Dana Norton and William Hansel prior to Bear River starting its police department. They had butted heads when Dana was the chief of police out in Hoopa about a cross-deputization agreement there. And Dana really felt like the sheriff's office in asking for these cross-deputization agreements was doing so in a way that would make tribal departments subservient to the sheriff's office. So everything from requiring tribal police departments who were cross-deputized to wear the sheriff's office patch to creating kind of a power structure in which the sheriff's office would be automatically in control of any crime scene on tribal land. And so even if the tribal chief of police was responding to a call and a brand new just hired sheriff's deputy was responding to the same call on tribal land, the sheriff's deputy would automatically be in control of that crime scene. So there's just power dynamics there that Dana felt weren't right. And said so at the time when he was in Hoopa, and that did not go over well apparently, and there was a fair amount of conflict between the two. So that carried over to when Dana took the position in Bear River. But really what it came down to, as far as I could tell, is just two, very strident interpretations of what was a murky area of law at the time. It has since been clarified by the U.S. Supreme Court that tribal departments do have the power to detain, non-natives when they're suspected of a crime. At that point, it was a little bit more of an open question. And Sheriff Hansel came down really hard on one side that they do not have this authority. And, Dana Norton was really resolute that they did. Ultimately, say that the Supreme Court decision affirmed, kind of Dana's side of the issue. And then, but I think what I still don't have a clear answer on is why there just wasn't more communication between the two. What I kind of keep coming back to is, police officers, sheriff's deputies issue warnings all the time. I think probably all of us have been pulled over for speeding or, having a vehicle code infraction and being told to knock it off or get it fixed and go along our way, right? So I don't understand why there wasn't an effort after the first, detention that Josh did with this person with an active warrant, why there wouldn't have been an effort from the sheriff's office to say, look, we think this is a real clear violation of the law, and if you keep doing it, we are going to, pursue charges against your officers or something. But as far as I can tell, there was just none of that communication.
And so before we wrap up, I, of course, want your final thoughts on this story, and I need everybody to read this in its entirety. It's definitely a great story. But the other thing is, now that we have the Supreme Court decision, does it seem that these issues are hopefully going to be more ironed out in the future?
I mean, I think that question of whether a tribal police officer can detain a non-native person, I think is clearly answered at this point. So there is clarity there. There are still a host of other questions and complexities with, with tribal police enforcing state law. And so I guess that would be my final thought is that the story includes a sidebar about Assemblyman James Ramos' effort in the California legislature to introduce bills that would give tribal police the power to become state certified and enforce state law, and really give them the autonomy to do so as they please, and not have this cross jurisdictional issues with sheriff's offices or police departments. So I think that ultimately seems like the only answer that's on the table as far as really eliminating a lot of this kind of jurisdictional morass, as some law enforcement professors referred to it to me.
Well, and the story also has a very interesting part about the former officer Bates and how difficult it was to get this expunged from his record. And that was very frustrating to read as well.
Yeah, he has made very clear to me, and I think it's very clear in the story, that this has been a life-altering experience to him. That he really very much had pictured having a long career in law enforcement. This ended that career, and really resulted in some family issues and mental health issues that he's had to go through, and that he feels like he's coming out of now, thankfully. But it was again a life-altering experience for him.
Well, thank you so much for all your hard work on this, and I encourage everybody to pick up this week's journal and read the entire story for themselves.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to pivot to Jenifer, and Jenifer has a story of a phoenix rising.
Well, we are still in the Eel River Valley for this story, and some of you may be familiar with a little restaurant and hotel called the Ivanhoe, which is down in Ferndale and has been in that spot since, let me check my notes, 1875. So
quite a minute.
Yeah, I know. And it's been running more or less continually since. We've had a couple of fires, including in 1875 and 1944, and Lord knows there have been earthquakes, floods, all kinds of things, and the Ivanhoe continues to stand. Now, it has been closed for a few years. In 2020, when COVID was ripping through our communities and restaurants were shutting down, the Ivanhoe was shut down after owner Dave Money passed away. His wife Barb co-owned the place with him, and she put it up for sale. And it's been on the market for a while now. And I think there's been a lot of discussion. Lord knows people have hit me with all kinds of rumors about this person, that person's going to buy it, et cetera, et cetera. No person who called me to tell me Guy Fieri is buying it. Doesn't look like that happened. So with all of those calls, what really struck me is that the community investment in the Ivanhoe as part of the character of Ferndale, part of the historic nature of the town, etc., is really, really important to folks over there. And to a lot of folks in the rest of the county too. The Ivanhoe was, for some people, a weekly spot. For some people, the bar was an everyday spot. For others, it was a place where you do your celebrations and your big events, etc. Somebody graduates high school, you go and eat dinner at the Ivanhoe. So now, after the 20-year reign of the Monies running the place, Jeffrey Musselman is taking over. This is the next round of questions that I get, which is, are they going to change it? Is it going to be different? Lord knows that Humboldt loves its legacy restaurants, and I'm here to comfort you with the information that, at least according to Mr. Musselman, there won't be that much change. In fact, he spent the last 40 years in Southern California working as a plumber. I guess that's how you save the money to buy a huge restaurant. plumbers, man. Should have married a plumber. I'm kidding, husband. But
It's good union work if you can get it.
I know. Isn't that what everybody's mom said? Marry a plumber. Is that just me, my weird family?
All I know is mamas don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. That's all I know.
No cowboys. Plumbers. So Musselman has bought the place and is restoring certain things. Apparently there's a lot of redwood that's been covered up, including the bar, which has been covered with paint, but is a, quote, nice looking piece of wood. And there are other things that he's bringing back kind of to their glory. He's doing some minor touch-ups, but expect the room to pretty much stay the same. Also, Barb Money is pitching in. She's helping with the transition into running the restaurant. So he'll have help with this. This is his first time running a restaurant, but it's not his first time in Humboldt. He actually grew up here and went to Arcata High and everything. And he's got family in Ferndale and family around the county. So he's not new to the area. He's not new to Ferndale, although he said he only ate at the Ivanhoe twice, which actually makes sense, right? If you're from northern Humboldt, you really don't go out down there so much. But anyway, his other relatives are regulars there, so everybody's really committed to keeping the traditions and the recipes and the menu the same. He's going to be adding a mocktail menu, thank you, and he'll be adding a couple of other things, but the standard dishes that the Ivanhoe was known for, such as steaks, prime rib on Friday nights, and chicken cacciatore over polenta, those things are all coming back, as is the general bar menu, slightly expanded, as I said, with the mocktails, and the chef is going to be somebody who used to be cooking there. So Barb has provided the recipes. Chef Jeff Dunker, that's hard to say, harder than you think. Chef Jeff Dunker is going to be coming back. He's been cooking in a couple places, including Campground and Salt, and he is thrilled to be coming back, is what he told me. And he has really missed the prime rib with au jus himself. So he's enthusiastic about getting back into a kitchen that he knows so well and working with some of the same staff again, probably. They're trying to get more wait staff back. They really want to, if you haven't picked up on it thus far, keep it the same as it was. This is a classic case of it not being broke and nobody trying to fix it. So it's kind of a fun thing to see Ferndale get back, as it's been such a kind of a community treasure that they've held onto for so long. And so it's nice to see something come back from, you know, the misery of all the places that we lost during COVID and all the restaurants that shut down and some of the local icons that we lost last year that people were really sentimental about. It's lovely to see some place that is going to be coming back and bringing some of that nostalgic dining back to a very nostalgic town.
And now in the article, it's also noted that the hotel will also actually kind of be getting more of a facelift.
Yes, I did not know that it was only 5 rooms. But I guess when I think back about every Western I've ever seen, the hotel rooms over the Saloon, there's not that many of them. So it's 5 rooms. He'll probably keep one, he said, for, you know, as an apartment for family and people who are visiting, etc. But he is planning to do an update on those rooms and give them more of what he calls a spa feel, more of a contemporary feel, which I don't know that that's going to send people up in arms, despite, you know, the boogeyman of change. Oh, and he told me something funny. He's not as I said, a restaurant person. He's, working in the plumbing industry, he certainly had lots of friends who were in restaurants, but he went to bartending school. He does not drink himself, but he went to bartending school because he figured, well, what if I have to jump behind the counter at some point? What if I need to fill in? I should be able to tend bar. I think that's kind of fun. And so you might catch him. He'll probably be just doing sort of a back end business stuff of the restaurant, but you might catch the new owner of the Ivanhoe behind the bar one of these nights and expect it to open sometime in February. We don't have a firm date, but look for it next month.
All right. Thanks, Jenifer. And I love that level of commitment from Mr. Musselman. I wish him all the best. And I look forward to dining there again at Kinetic Sculpture Race time. So that wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick up your copy today, or of course you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us, getting started in a fresh new year, and staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community.